Hi everyone. I'm going to show you how to do kind of a sample for your hand sewing. So I'm calling this the hand sew wall hanging sample because you're going to end up with this, right? I didn't finish doing my letters across, so I was going to show you how I did the pencil. But anyway, I'm going to make this with you right now, and then you'll have it to turn in for a project grade. And it's just basically practice for you doing all these stitches so that when you start your projects, you'll know how to do the stitches. You'll have something to look at to remind you. All right. So the first thing you want to do is get a piece of fabric that is 12 by 6. And if it's not, it might be a little wrinkly, what have you, the best thing to do is just give it a good press. So we're going to do that. All right. So here's my ironing board. And have my iron here. And all you're going to do is put it on a medium setting, and just wiggle your nozzle or the nose of the iron if you want. And there's a steam button on the top. You can always push the steam button and a shoot of steam will come out. I think this actually cooled off because I didn't use it. It's heating up again. Anyway. Okay. Let's wait for it to heat up a little bit more. All right, now it's getting warm. All right, here we go. Okay, so now you have a nice iron piece of fabric to start. All right. So go get yourself a ruler, and you are going to measure halfway down on the long sides. I don't know if you can see this here, but I'm going to put the ruler against the bottom, and it's about 12 inches. So 6 inches is your halfway point. So grab a pencil or a marking pencil and just lightly put a mark there at the 6-inch point. Okay, I'm going to show you how I just wrote that on there. 6-inch point. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to end up putting a popsicle stick. Actually, let me go get my popsicle sticks right here. It's just kind of a good size for this. But we're going to end up putting a popsicle stick like right here just to give this wall hanging some stability. Like I was showing you, I have the popsicle stick in here, and that way, it just gives it a little bit more stability up at the top when you hang it up. Okay, so we're going to measure a spot for the popsicle stick to fit into. So it ends up being 2 1/4 inches to the left of your mark that you made. So you made this mark here. So go 2 1/4 inches here and make a mark, and then go 2 1/4 inches to the other side and make a mark. All right, so I'm going to do that right now. 2 1/4. Just make another mark just like we did before. And then 2 1/4 out this way. All right, and so you should have a space about 4 1/2 if you did it correctly from one mark to the other. And then of course you got your center mark there. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to actually fold this couple of triangles into this to make a trapezoid shape. So where this notch is here, you're going to want that to be the top fold of your triangle. Okay, and where your corner is down here, you want that to be the other fold of the triangle. Okay, so it's going to end up like this on one side. And you can see again, this is where I put my mark, the furthest mark on one side, and that's going to be where the fold is to the top of the triangle. So I'm doing it up in the air, so I'm trying to make sure I got it right on there. Okay, right, and then the bottom of your fold is actually going to be in the corner. Okay, so like that. All right, so you can see that it's on that angle there. So you can go ahead and use a finger press, or you can go back to the iron if you want. You can always use like a pencil, makes a good finger press or pencil press, if you will. And the rulers are also good for doing that if you don't have a nail. And then the handle of the shears can also give you a nice press if you don't have a fingernail. So I have a fingernail, so I'm going to do it with that. Okay, so there we go. So that's one side done. You are going to do the other side the exact same way. So remember, you're going to pull up this. This is the top corner, and this is your little line that you made. So you're going to make that the turning point right there. Okay, that's your turning point, and then you're going to keep guiding it until the next turning point is down at the corner. That's how you create your fold. So just make sure that it's nice and flat before you start creasing it, right? And then crease that down too, just like you did the other one. Okay. All right. So these are in the way. These, the pieces of the triangle here and here. So we're going to cut these back a little bit. So I want you to grab your ruler, and you're going to measure 1 inch from these edges, okay? So I'm going to put the ruler right like at the edge, matching up the fold to the edge. Get your pencil, and 1 inch down, you're just going to put a little mark. Okay, so there's one. I can't see something. So there's 1 inch. That's where I put a mark on my fabric from 1 inch from the edge, just like that. Okay, you really only need a couple of lines because now you're going to connect them with the ruler. So like that. Just connect it all the way across the entire triangle. Don't make a mark on the underneath part, just the triangle. You can see I did that, right? There's just the triangle. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do the other side too. Keep everything consistent. So I guess I had to do it this way. So yeah, it does work best if you match up the fold of your fabric to the edge of the ruler, and then mark where the 1 inch point is. And right there. Okay. And then I'm going to connect that. I don't know what that is. That's thread. Okay. So then I'm going to connect those two lines right there. Like that. Again, don't write on the underneath fabric, just the folded piece that created the triangle. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut on those lines, because that's how we're going to get rid of that extra piece. Okay, so I'm just going to actually just cut right on that line that we just made on both sides. Okay, so I'm going to put it down. It's easier for me to cut this way. And it's that one, and then it's easier this way. All right, and you really don't need these pieces. You can just throw them out. Okay, so now it should look like this. So it looks a little bit, more evened up now on the sides. So we are going to hem these sides down. We're going to do a basic hem on one side and a herringbone stitch on the other, which is another way to do a hem. So that'll be a new stitch that we're learning. All right, so the raw edge is here and here. So on both of these raw edges, we're going to turn over 1/4 inch. So 1/4 inch is 2 lines on your seam gauge. I'm using a ruler, so it's actually 4 lines because these are in 16ths, but you need to turn over 1/4 inch, okay? And so you're going to actually lift the flap open this way, all the way, and then you're going to turn over a small amount like that, okay? So basically I'm turning over a little tiny bit like that. It equals 1/4 inch. So you can, it's going to be hard to go back to the ironing board because you're going to press out this fold here that you just made. You want to keep that fold. So I would just use a finger press, and the alternates would be, of course, the ruler or the pencil, something that you can get that to stay down with. I'm just going to use my nail because I have one. That's the best if you have it. Okay. If you end up creasing a little bit more than 1/4 inch, that is okay. All right. So I've creased over 1/4 inch, right? So now I'm going to actually refold what I had before. Because remember, we turned over that amount that, positioned it in the corners and the marks here. So I already had a fold there. So I'm just going to fold it back over the way it was. So now I have a double fold. So double fold means that you've got a fold on this side as you have one on the top too. So once I have my double fold done, I'm going to pin that in place. So you are going to need 3 pins, 3 straight pins. Okay. So I wouldn't pin too close to the edge because you are going to be sewing and you don't want the pin in the way. So just maybe a 1/4 of an inch up from the top. And I would just pin them horizontally in there. If you don't know how to pin, basically you wiggle a little bit in and then you see some of the pin on the back side, just a little bit on the back side. And then you use your finger to push that back into the front. So most of what you see as far as your pin goes is on the front. You see a little bit on the back. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and actually I got to repin that because I did that up in the air and it didn't sit right. There we go. So it's going to end up looking like that. So we're going to do this the same way. We're going to turn over a 1/4 of an inch. Okay. So you can just check that out with your seam gauge or your ruler here. Just make sure you've got 2 lines and then you're going to finger press it just like we did the other side. Okay. Just like that. Actually, let me go get a seam gauge because that's what you guys will be using. So you'll be using the seam gauge, which is easier to use because it's smaller. Okay, so the it's 2 lines on the seam gauge equals a 1/4 of an inch right there. So that's what you're turning over here. Right. Okay, so I've got mine finger pressed. So I'm going to continue to refold what I had folded before with now the new fold holding the bottom edge under. All right, so once you have that positioned nicely, you're going to pin it down just like I did before on the other side. Okay, so actually the best technique to pin is to do one side first. Remember, put a little bit in, get your finger back there and push it through, and then actually to do the other end. So to actually go all the way to the other end like this and then get your pin in there and then come back and do the one. Actually, that's too close. I don't want you to go so close to the edge because then you can't really sew. And then you want to put a pin in the middle and that's all you need, just the 3. Okay, put a little bit in there and then grab it with your other finger. So there you go. So now we have what I was telling you is the trapezoid shape, which is what you're supposed to have right now. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sew these 2 down. We're going to get ourselves a single thread needle. All right, so, or you got yourself a sewing needle here. If you can see that. Here you go. There's my sewing needle. It's a little eye there. Okay, and I'm going to get, I wouldn't get any more than 24 inches, which is 2 feet, because it just gets too hard to manage. All right, so go ahead and thread your needle like that. Oops. There we go. All right, and you want to go halfway down with the 2 strands, and then you'll have a single strand all the way to the bottom. So when you get all the way to the bottom, that's where you're going to put your knot. Okay, and we talked about doing the square knot where you make the loop and then you take your free end and stick it into the middle of the loop and then you pull. I don't know if you can see that there. You pull and you've got your knot. If it's, you can try to do a knot on top of a knot, but actually I think that one will be okay. Just if you don't pull it too tight, it will, be a more productive for you. And then you always want to cut the tail. If I can see them holding that. See that there's a tail right there. So I'm just going to cut that off. That way you don't have that extra part. All right, so there's my knot. And here's the top where the needle is. And as you can see, I have a double strand that actually I can pull that down a little more. A double strand goes halfway, and then the remaining of the remainder is going to be a single strand because you don't want to sew with the double strand. So you have to keep the double part up from the bottom. Okay. All right. So it really doesn't matter which side we do the basic hem stitch and which side we're going to do the herringbone. So I'll start with, I guess, this one. Okay, if you're right-handed, you're going to want to start from the right side. And if you're left-handed, you start from the left side. So I am going to go underneath a little bit. Just so basically you're going, let me see how I can show this. You're going to just start on one end and you're going to go a little bit under the flap, just the flap right there. Okay. And I'm not going to catch the bottom material. I'm just going in the upper flap like that all the way through. And then my knot, if I don't pull too hard, the knot will hold. There we go. There's my knot holding it underneath there. If you can see that underneath there. Oops. Right there. Okay, so there's my knot holding that. All right, so now I can reposition the flap back down. So I'm going to do, remember the prick stitch that we were doing when you did your basic hem sample. So we're going to do the prick stitch right, let's see if I can do this so you can see, right underneath the thread. Underneath the flap. So I have to kind of do it like this. So I have the right direction, but you can still see it. So remember, when you prick, you're only pricking like 2 stitches. Oh, by the way, I would probably, if I were you, use a thread color that matches the fabric. So that way you won't see everything on the side. I'm just using a different color so you can see what I'm doing better. All right. So we've done, we've hidden our knot, and now I've done my first stitch, which is the prick stitch. Whoops. Hold on a second. This is because I'm doing it upside down. Anyway. All right. So that'll be nice and secure on that very end there. So now the next thing we do is we skip 1/4 of an inch, and then we're going to slip the needle in just under the flap. Now we're not going into the lower fabric. We're just going the flap. And then you skip 1/4 of an inch. Okay. And then you're going to just do the prick stitch again. Let me get that out of the way this time. So the prick stitch is right underneath the flap, about 1/4 of an inch away from where you just sewed, like that. Okay. And then you just keep going in the same way. So I'm going to turn around now because it's easier for me to sew, but I'm going to do a slip stitch 1/4 of an inch away. And then I'm going, whoops, pull that too tight. All right. And then I'm going to do the prick stitch. All right, and then I'm going to do a slip stitch. So you just keep doing that all the way to the end. Okay, and then take your pins out when you get to them. Okay, I'm going to stop and start again, so that way I won't